Now, to discuss this conversation, I'm joined by Professor Mireille Rebeiz, Chair of Middle East Studies at Dickinson College. Professor Rebeiz, thanks for your time this afternoon. Now, the big question is, are we on the verge of an all-out war? And the factors are that Israel has no desire to quit war. It is supported by one of the world's superpowers, the United States. What we've seen since that awful day, October 7th, a couple of years ago now, is that Israel will not halt. They continue to have the support of the United States. And the United States has just said Israel, or anybody associated, in fact, those that bombed Iran, I think it is, should bear for severe consequences.
Well, first, thank you for having me. I wish it was under different circumstances than such a topic, but we are here today. The short answer is that we're definitely heading toward major escalation. Now, who are the parties that would be directly involved is the big question. It's not in the interest, actually, to go directly in war with Iran. And so the indirect war, or the wars by proxy, have been going on in the Middle East for decades right now. And right now what we're seeing is actually the result of these wars by proxy, the results of 1948, the rise of the State of Israel, the destitution of the Palestinian people, and so on. So the escalation is definitely happening. Like you mentioned, Netanyahu is not interested in ending this war for several reasons. It's actually in his power it's in his interest to remain in power, so he doesn't have to face the anger of the Israeli people. Before October 7, the terrorist attack of October 7, Netanyahu was actually, and before his election, he was on trial for corruption. And there were massive protests inside Israel against contentious law that wanted to curb the rights of minorities inside Israel, and eventually annex the West Bank, but also amend the way the judicial system works. So the Israelis were protesting this government itself. It's in the interest of Prime Minister Netanyahu to extend this war, to save his political career, but also to save to appeal to his constituents from the ultra-conservative or ultra-Orthodox group that actually elected him. And the intention is definitely not to stop at Gaza and the West Bank, despite what the numerous reports have been showing. We suspect that the ultimate goal is to actually annex these two parts of occupied Palestine, and then potentially even a ground invasion in South Lebanon might lead to something even bigger. Now, the big question is whether we're going to see an immediate intervention from the United States versus Iran. Iran had declared that after the attacks we saw yesterday on Israel, Iran had declared the end of its attack, and Iran framed it as the right for self-defense after the assassination of its three top leaders. The Hamas leader, the guardian of the revolution leader, and of course, Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah. UK is stepping in as well to say that it will defend Israel's right to exist. Of course, this is all framed within the context of an existential threat to all the Jews in the world, but the state of Israel. So we are no longer talking about small attacks and small tit-for-tat border fights between Hezbollah and Israel. We are really talking about major escalation.
Professor, I'd like to bring into the conversation the issue around proxies, right? And it almost seems like the proxies are taking greater ownership of the war or conflict than the parties that originally started the conflict. Unpack for us, please, how all of that works.
So it's interesting because people assume that terrorism is born out of a vacuum, out of nowhere. And actually, studies indicate that terrorism is born for several reasons. And I'm saying this, I consider my job as an oncologist who's looking at cancer and not in any way, shape, or form to endorse terrorism. Hamas and Hezbollah were born out of despair and out of the continuous violation of Palestinian rights in the region. We've never had serious talk actually, let me rephrase that. In the past 2 decades, we have not had a serious discussion about Palestinian rights and the rights for the Palestinian people for self-determination. Gaza for the past 15 years have been entirely ignored by the world. The latest elections go back to the 15 years. And so the hypocrisy of the world is to look at Gaza and say, well, they elected Hamas, but how would we have a democracy properly functioning in Gaza if Gaza itself is an open prison? So Hamas and Hezbollah were born out of that despair, out of these perpetuated oppressions that we've been witnessing for the past 2 decades. Of course, they have their own agenda. They're both funded, whether it's important to note that Hamas is Sunnite, Hezbollah is Shiite, but the funding is definitely coming from Iran. And this is the difference. There is a mixing of the righteous Palestinian cause with Iran's agenda in the region, which is the spreading of the Iranian ideology in the region. Many civilians oppose it. And the proof is today, with the war between Iran and Israel, where's the news on Gaza today? It became a distraction, as if Gaza is a footnote or a second news right now. So this is to say that these proxy wars are ultimately not serving any peace dialogue, not serving the Palestinian cause, not serving any sustainable solution in the Middle East. They're only serving the terrorism that we're seeing coming out of Iran.
So let's bring Hamas into the equation. Do you get the sense that they have sacrificed the people of Palestine? Because it's almost like a little kid with a stick hitting somebody who's got an armful or a bucket full of bigger weapons, and that's what they've done, because they went in on that fateful day on October 7th and have not been able to deal with the Israelis.
So there's a lot of things to unpack here. On the one hand, Hamas is definitely not equipped to face the Israelis' powers. Israel is powerful on its own, but also it's backed by the United States. So the technology coming of the United States is tremendous compared to the technology that Hamas could hold, or even Hezbollah, in that matter of fact. However, the concern on the ground right now is that Gaza is going to be annexed. The proof is, in the United States, we're seeing more and more people saying that Gaza is going to be part of the Israeli map, and there are places where there is selling real estate in Gaza for the next settlers. Whether this is the mass majority of Americans, it's not true, absolutely, but it is happening, right? Like the discussion of annexing Gaza is happening. However, what happened is there's no doubt that there is a shift in the media and more attention to Palestinian rights. So yes, Hamas failed and led a mass destruction to the Palestinian people and to Gaza, who are paying with their bloods, with their children, with their loved ones, with the buildings, the economy, you name it. However, because of Gaza, there's more and more attention to Palestinian rights. I mean, look at the shift we're witnessing at the United Nations level. Major countries are talking about Palestinian rights for the self-determination and Palestinian statehood. And this discussion has been stagnant for years. Ireland,
sorry, Professor,
Spain. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Please allow me to come in there. And you raise the issue
Please, go ahead.
You raise the issue of the United Nations, which was going to be my final point, and that's the fact that the United Nations appears to be largely ineffective since October 7th, right? So can we expect any form of viable diplomatic channels to prevent further escalation?
So you're absolutely right on that. The structure of the United Nations is the legacy of colonization and slavery. The Security Council is just mimicking empowering global North countries when the large majorities of the countries are calling for a ceasefire and for an imminent diplomatic solution. The proof is the Assembly General met recently in May, and had called with more than 140 countries for the immediate recognition of the Palestinian statehood. The Security Council has rejected that, and the veto came from the United States. So one country or a handful of countries are opposing the question of the Palestinian statehood. And no surprise there, these countries are from the global north. And so the United Nations is not only ineffective on the question of Palestine-Israel, but also it is duplicating a colonial discourse. How to move forward? I would say the pressure should come from within. Countries, they must listen to their own people. In the United States, there are many, many Americans who are horrified by what's happening in Israel-Palestine, and they want a sustainable peace solution for everybody in the region. And that my hope is that the pressure is going to come within from these countries, whether United States, England, the major countries who are major players in this. And then that would lead to a sustainable solution. Otherwise, we're heading toward full-blown escalation, no doubt.
Certainly seems that the power is with the people. Professor Mireille Rebeiz, Chair of Middle East Studies at Dickinson College, unpacking for us that issue around a possible war in the Middle East.